Josh Allen is as elite as they come, but will he support any of his receivers to a top fantasy season this year? We discuss the top 3 storylines for the Buffalo Bills entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today, we are going to discuss the top 3 storylines for the Buffalo Bills entering this season. And we know Josh Allen is fantastic, but you have to pay the price. He's going as the top quarterback off the board in the second round in a lot of drafts. So we'll discuss if he's worth that cost. James Cook is, he seems like a very fair value right now, running back 14. So we'll discuss if we think he's too low in rankings right now. And then there's just so many weapons that Josh Allen likes to spread the ball around to, but it hasn't turned out to be great fantasy success for those receivers. So let's get into all of this. Let's start with Josh Allen right now. Like I said, sitting at quarterback 1 in consensus ranks, 24th overall off the board. Last year, he was the quarterback 2 in total points and points per game behind only Lamar Jackson. He was the quarterback 1 in 2023, quarterback 2 in 2022, quarterback 1 in 2021, and I believe quarterback 2 again in 2020. I don't have that on here, but since 2020, he is the quarterback 1 on average by a lot, 23.7 points per game he's averaged over the last 5 seasons. The next closest is Lamar Jackson at 21.8. So a good 2 points more per game than any other quarterback. But Vinny, do you think he's worth that high draft cost? Do you think any quarterback is?
I mean, if there's one quarterback that would be worth this cost, it's Josh Allen. There's a couple things that we look at with Josh Allen that he has that no other quarterback has in terms of fantasy and really in reality for the most part. Number one is he stays extremely healthy. This guy can run over people. He's going to be on the field. He's going to give you all the games while the Bills are still competitive, right? He might sit out a week 18 or 2 because they're that good. But overall, when they're super competitive and he is going to take the brunt of abuse, he's going to hand out a lot of abuse with his big frame. So he's extremely durable. So that's the one thing. You're going to get all the games. The second, he's had the least fluctuation of any of these top quarterbacks. Even Lamar Jackson's been a little bit up and down between his MVP seasons that we saw. And then last year, Lamar did outscore Josh Allen. But when you look consistently at the body of work, you say Josh Allen has a higher ceiling and a higher floor than any other quarterback on the board. And Jalen Hurts has had a season as well that he's been up there with Josh Allen. But none of these guys have consistently been up there. I mean, we saw Jalen Hurts slip down a little bit. And it's amazing because we talked about his receivers and the things he has out there. It's not a lot, but they spread the ball around. They use his legs a lot in the red zone. He just is a compiler of stats at a very high level. And he's just really unstoppable when he's on the ground. So I think he's the single most dangerous and essential offensive weapon in this league. And that's why he was the MVP last year, because the Bills without him are pretty much lost here overall. So when you look at what he can do, I think he's a safe pick. You can do a lot worse than taking this quarterback at 24 overall at any position, right? I mean, in Superflex, he's got to be the number 1 pick, 2 QB leagues, easy number 1 pick, because he's the guy that you're going to know exactly what you get. It doesn't matter. They've changed offenses. They went from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady. Didn't mean a thing because his style of play is big arm, big plays, big scoring. It always happens week in and week out. So I think he's worth it. Everyone else, you're taking a little bit of risk, I'll be honest with you, because they go up and down. Even Lamar, we've seen it. Anyone else there in the top 5, there's a little bit of concern that things may not score as much as you'll get. With Josh Allen, there's a pretty good chance he will be the QB 1.1, and at worst, he's going to be the QB 3. So, I mean, that's a pretty safe pick, really, overall.
Yeah, and like he's going to pass for a ton of touchdowns, a ton of yards, but then you also know he's going to get at least 500 yards on the ground, anywhere from 8 to 15 touchdowns right on the ground
Yeah.
too to add to that. It's just pretty much a lock for him to just put up that production both in the through the air and on the ground, making him super safe. And he has not finished outside the top 2 quarterbacks in any of the last 5 seasons. So that does make him a safe pick if you do want to take a quarterback this early. If you're going to spend such an early draft pick on a quarterback, then I do think it has to be Josh Allen. But the concern is that you're taking Josh Allen over a really, really good running back in particular. Like, you're going to have to choose Josh Allen instead of having a Kyron Williams on your team, or a Bucky Irving, or a Josh Jacobs, or a Chase Brown. Like, a guy that can be a clear-cut running back 1, you're now taking a quarterback. Now, obviously, if it's super flex, he's gonna go 101, and that's different. But in a 1 quarterback league, that is a pretty big deal, because then you're talking about, like, if you, let's say you waited on quarterback, right? Let's say you waited for a guy like Justin Herbert or Brock Purdy, or a Jared Goff, someone that doesn't have the same ceiling as Josh Allen, definitely not as safe, but can get it done. Would you rather have a Bucky Irving and a Justin Herbert, or Josh Allen? And I mean, guys going around Justin Herbert are Najee Harris, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Travis Etienne. Like, would you rather those type of running backs, or get that great running back in a Bucky Irving and Kyron Williams, and then just go with a lower tier quarterback?
Yeah, this is something that is a little bit underrated when building your draft plan, is like, know what the opportunity cost is. Like, yeah, it's the cost of using this draft pick on a particular player, but what's going to cost you later, and what are the differences, right? So basically you look at the tiers at different positions. So if you think you see a lesser margin at running back later in the draft, like this guy is equal to this guy a little bit, and you feel okay about those values, go for it. But then again, you look at the running back, or the quarterbacks, I should say, and if all of a sudden, like Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels, and all these other guys, you don't feel like Josh Allen gives you that much of a delta difference advantage on taking Josh Allen, then you say, okay, I'm going to take the running back. But again, I think what kind of is the curveball here is that running backs are still volatile, right? There could be injuries, there could be time missed here. With Josh Allen, you know you're getting an asset that's going to be on the field and produce at a high level. It's like a sure thing in fantasy, and there are very few sure things in fantasy in terms of durability, availability, and just being able to put up the numbers year in and year out. There's just very few assets like that. Josh Allen is kind of a unicorn in that sense, that he can give it to you. And look, everyone might say he loses focus. This guy was at OTAs and working right as he was getting married. So this guy is not losing focus. I think he's gotten better and smarter as a quarterback, much like Lamar Jackson has, right? He's gotten better as just like a passing player. Came in with a lot of athleticism, good arm strength, but he's really put it together where he understands offenses now. He's a good leader. He's just going to execute. And I think, again, he won MVP, but there were some numbers he left on the table last year. So I think, again, if you want to just be safe, high ceiling, high floor, know you're going to get a guy week in and week out, you could do a lot worse. And then if you want to play the not zero RB game, but if you want to do the hero RB game, maybe say, I am going to target Josh Allen with my pick in round 2. Maybe you know that and go after your running back in round 1, and then look for your wide receiver values later in the draft. So you do have to have a plan of attack when you have Josh Allen, knowing at least you'll have one bird in hand that's going to give you big time scoring.
What is nice about Josh Allen is you don't have to worry about if he's on the road. You don't have to worry about if he has a tough defense to play against. He can get it done against anybody, anywhere. Whether, because he's so used to Buffalo, it does not matter. There's never a time where you're like, ooh, you have to sit Josh Allen because you're worried about this. Like, that just doesn't happen with him. It doesn't mean he doesn't ever have bad games. Of course, everyone does. But yeah, if you want to take him, I think that's okay. But at the same time, you might feel like you're hurting a bit at your, maybe your flex spot or your running back, a 2 spot or something like that, just because of, having to use that second round pick on a quarterback could be tough to swallow. But we're going to get into James Cook now, kind of switch conversations here. And James Cook sitting at running back 14 after being the running back 8 overall last year. I don't really see a reason why he would drop that much. So we're going to discuss everything about James Cook right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, we're waiting for sports to rev up again. We do have baseball, however, in full swing. All the summer sports are there for you. And whether you're all about baseball under lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make sure every game is even more exciting for you. And it even extends to things that are not games. You have Ronald Acuna Jr. about to be in a home run derby. You have Cal Raleigh tearing it up for the Mariners, headed to a potential MVP season. He's going to be out there hacking in the home run derby, so that's a good place to get on the action as well. So don't forget about all that. You're already following all that action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game or your home run derby or any event like that while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, makes even regular season games and other events feel like must watch. Whether you're looking at a same game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a great time to join. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bet if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, FanDuel, get in on the summer sports action now. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show and look at another aspect. Josh Allen of the Bills offense. We know what we're going to get from him. James Cook might be close to a sure thing as well, but interesting with his rankings, he's RB14, 39, 38, 9th, 38th off the board, depending on what rankings you're looking at, a fourth-round pick. Last year, however, he was a solidified, I should say, a solid RB1 all around here when you look at RB10, RB8. So whatever adjective you want to use for James Cook, he was pretty fantastic last season.
Yeah, running back 8 overall, running back 10 in average scoring. And now a big, huge chunk of that was all the touchdowns he scored. 16 rushing touchdowns, 18 total touchdowns last season. That is going to be hard to replicate, right? But he is, like, we all expect the Bills to be a really good offense and score a lot of points. And we're going to be talking about these other weapons. And it's not like we're super excited for any of them to score a bunch of touchdowns. So it likely is, again, going to be Josh Allen and James Cook, getting it done on the ground near the goal line. So I do think he's still going to have plenty of opportunities to score at least 12 touchdowns again. And the rushing attempts have opportunity to increase. Only 207 rushing attempts last year. Also only 38 targets, which was shocking to me. He should be utilized more in the passing game. We want to see more targets there. And then some games he just kind of, for whatever reason, the team would just kind of go away from the run altogether. Like, in week 4, only 9 carries. In week 11, 9 carries. In week 14, 6 carries. Now, if they're in like a really high scoring shootout or losing, they do just kind of abandon the run game in terms of the running back pretty quickly. So that's a worry. But in the 11 games, he had more than 10 carries. He averaged 18.7 points per game in half PPR. So that's an elite fantasy asset right there. I do think James Cook is a very, very talented running back. I think he should get even more work next year. I think his running back 14 cost is one of the better values in the draft this year.
Yeah, the funny thing, you were talking about some of those running backs that you could get where Josh Allen is going. It's kind of an interesting tier, and the tiers say that Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs are kind of the last of that second tier all the way through RB9 and half-point PPR. Then you get into the people you mentioned, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, Chase Brown. But where James Cook is ranked, he's between Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. So that should not be the case. I think he has upside to be higher than that. Now, the funny thing is, based on where these guys are going, you could end up with a combination of Josh Allen and James Cook, easily, the way things are progressing in some of these rankings and the way these drafts would go. So, again, I don't know if I would want to go there with that combination, but at least you would lock up basically every Bills rushing touchdown this season if you went in that direction. But yeah, I think Cook is maybe just underutilized. We'll see what the contract says. I thought, again, he was going to be used a lot more as a receiver, but he's been used a lot more like Dalvin Cook, where he's the guy that is the early down guy, finishes, drives quite a bit. So, again, there's no real competition here. He's an integral part of what they want to do. The Joe Brady shift just about a year and a half ago with going away from Ken Dorsey, that's when we really saw James Cook go into hyperdrive, and we've kept this offense and the status quo. There's not a lot of changes here in Buffalo. So you'd say, why would we want to change and drop him a little bit down here? And look, those guys are not perfect that are ahead. I mean, we'll see what happens with Chase Brown. Can he hold up for a whole season? Breece Hall's had some injury issues. Walker is also up there with injuries. You look going down, you have Chuba Hubbard that is not completely healthy all the time. And then just overall, I think this is maybe the sweet spot for James Cook, where I think he can really get an RB1. So I don't understand necessarily. The only thing I could see pushing him down is really other people stepping up and scoring a little bit more than James Cook. But however you look at it, he's a great value, and easily, I mean, I don't know if I would even sweat him finishing in the top 12. I think that's almost guaranteed here if he pretty much sees the same role as last season and stays healthy.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with him being my number one running back on my fantasy team. Like if I go wide receivers early, or like we said, we take a quarterback or a tight end early, and you get James Cook early in the 4th round, and he's your RB1, I'm very happy with that. And I think that's kind of where that list ends, because you mentioned, like, I don't want Breece Hall to be my running back 1. I really don't also want Kenneth Walker with his injury history to be my running back 1. Maybe Alvin Kamara, if he can keep it going with his age. He keeps getting, he's being drafted low just because of the age and people worrying about that, but he keeps finishing very high in fantasy. But even when you look at the wide receivers that James Cook is going around, Terry McLaurin and Marvin Harrison Jr. and DJ Moore, like I want James Cook over all of the guys that he's going around in drafts. I prefer him. I think he has a very high ceiling. I think he has a pretty high floor too, because of the offense he's in. Obviously, an injury to Josh Allen would derail like the whole Bills offense, but that's any of these guys, right? If they're going to lose their starting quarterback, it's probably going to be pretty bad for them. So like I said, the biggest worry is that you want those targets to increase, and he can be a receiving back. So I'm shocked with how low it was last year, especially with the need for targets. So I don't necessarily see those targets increasing. So you are going to have to depend on those touchdowns continuing to rack up. But you're not paying a top price for him. I think running back 14, 4th round, I'm willing to take that risk that he can score 12 or more touchdowns again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable and a fair value, and you don't see a lot of that, where you see maybe guys being overhyped, which I thought that could happen with James Cook. It did not happen. He was still settled in a nice place, and he isn't just like thrown down, right? Like, okay, will he duplicate the season? But I think he feels just right where he's going, and he's a little motivated, right? We'll see what this contract thing does, but I think there's definitely incentive a little bit to make sure he locks down the contract. I know that could cause some separation between him and the team, but overall, I think he knows that he has to have another big season. I mean, keep in mind, he's only had one real season where he's been like the true number 1 back in Buffalo. To get paid like those top workhorse backs, I think you need to show it again here this season. So I think there's definitely going to be some motivation there to make sure he gets that big payday going into 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm with you. So we're going to move on now to discuss these receivers for the Bills. And, you got Keon Coleman, who they drafted right at the top of the 2nd round last year. You got Khalil Shakir, who led the team in targets and fantasy production last year, but it still wasn't exciting. They only really added Joshua Palmer in free agency, but, he's never been too exciting for fantasy. And then Dalton Kincaid, everyone's just waiting for him to break out, but it does seem like maybe, the fantasy community is kind of getting over waiting for him. So he is being drafted pretty late. Do we think that maybe he can bounce back and break out in his 3rd year? We will talk about it right after a quick break. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, Vinny, let's figure out these Bills receivers and if we want any of them, because it's so interesting to be so open to drafting a quarterback that high. and then not want any of his weapons. And that might be where we're sitting here. So let's go through these ranks. Khalil Shakir is sitting as the highest among the wide receivers at wide receiver 39. He was wide receiver 44 on average last season. Ken Coleman has a wide receiver 51 rank. He was wide receiver 58 on average last year. Joshua Palmer, wide receiver 70 rank, wide receiver 83 on average last year with the Chargers. And then Dalton Kincaid is at tight end 12. He was tight end 22 on average last year. And that one really hurt because he was going very early in drafts. Many people expected him to have a big second season, which just did not happen whatsoever. Shakir last year led this team in targets with 100 targets. That's it. So what are your thoughts? If you had to choose one of these guys to go after in drafts, who would it be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we talked a lot about some of the players that are around Khalil Shakir in the draft. You have Rome Odunze, who we think could really break out this year with Caleb Williams. We have Jacoby Myers, who we think is a sleeper. That Raiders offense with Geno Smith is basically their key veteran target there to play off Brock Bowers. And then look at Juwan Jennings, who might have a key role should Brandon Ayuk have a long time to get back on the field. So this is very interesting where he's a number one receiver on his team, and he's going after some of these like second and third targets or right in that same range. Well, I think the nature of the Bills' offense is to spread it around. Do we think Keon Coleman's probably going to get more involved? Yeah, you would think so, right? I mean, he kind of was a zero in terms of just his consistent involvement in this offense. It's been really hard to look at the post Stephon Diggs world of this receiving core. It just is not the same. And maybe because the Diggs was so good and he dominated targets and all these guys were just kind of complementary pieces, now they're basically spreading the ball around like nuts. And then this is why they got more run oriented with James Cook and also Josh Allen controlling a lot of the action, really spreading the ball around. I think in a way, it makes Josh Allen more dangerous when he doesn't have one guy, because then it's spreading around. But for fantasy, that's not all that great. I think you think Shakir might be the guy, but you look at Dalton Kincaid, they've been very reluctant to just let him loose, right? They've forced him Dawson Knox there quite a bit. He steals some targets. They don't throw to Dalton Kincaid well in the red zone. It's very odd. Like they use a first-round pick on him, but just not using him the way you think. And he's kind of becoming the new Kyle Pitts, right? In terms of the flash, a little bit as a first-round pick in his rookie season, but then, just maybe not a good draft pick for what this team is trying to accomplish. And they did have an offensive change, so keep that in mind. But I think Shakir, like, he's a guy that I might draft late just to play the matchups a little bit. He's really good when he gets a favorable matchup, especially when he's working the slot, right? He's not a bad platoon guy, and it's pretty predictable, again, when they might use it as a Shakir game. But everyone else is like, I think it's a mixed bag on the outside, mixed bag at tight end. So really, it's Shakir, no one. And again, Shakir didn't even top out as a wide receiver 3 last year.
Yeah, with these guys, I mean, Shakir, I definitely have no interest in whatsoever. His yards per reception are just too low. Yeah. He only had 4 games last year with more than 11 fantasy points, and it's not like it was much higher than that, like 12.9, 15.4. Like those are 15.4, 16.2, and a 19-point game. Like, cool, those are good. They were spread apart, though. Very hard to know when they're going to come. And even games he had really high. I mean, he had 12 targets in week 11 against the Chiefs. He had 70 receiving yards. It's just like it takes so much for him to have a blow up game. And you mentioned the guys he's going around. I want them all over him in Jerry Jeudy, Rome Odunze, Juwan Jennings, Jacoby Myers. I would even rather just take a shot that maybe Deebo Samuel can be good in Washington, even though I don't expect him to be, but at least there's a chance. Like, I really just don't think Khalil Shakir offers anything at all in terms of upside. And really, and he's not safe at all either. I mean, so many games where he just completely did nothing for fantasy. So very much out on Shakir. With Dalton Kincaid, I want to be out on, right? He only has 2 career games with more than 11 fantasy points. And those 2 games were 15 and 13 points. So it's not like they were big blow-up games either. They both came in 2023. And it was when he scored a touchdown in both games. He needed a touchdown just to get over that 11 fantasy points in any game. He only has 5 career games with more than 60 receiving yards. Last year, only 3 games of more than 50 receiving yards and never more than 53 receiving yards. Only 2 touchdowns in each of his 2 seasons. It's just like the production is not there. I know some people will point to the injuries last year, and maybe that was a thing, right? Dealing with knee injury to both of his knees. However, like he didn't have the PCL injury until week 10, and he wasn't doing anything before then. So I don't know. I think I'm out on both of those. Maybe if I'm going for one, it's Keon Coleman, that maybe he can break out in his second season. We saw really one good game from him. That's really it in his first year. But wide receiver 51 going that late, I'm willing to maybe take a shot that he can break out with Josh Allen. As you know, Coleman has a chance to be the top target on his team.
Yeah, why did they make that trade with the Chiefs again when Xavier Worthy was sitting there? I will never know. But he would be fantastic in a Bills uniform with his speed right now and catching Josh Allen balls. This is bringing up an interesting point that we haven't maybe looked at the rankings in a while at tight end. We'll get up to all those positional ranking updates here once we get through our team reports here for all 32. But you look at this tier that's developed. This is after, by the way, my favorite combo of David Njoku and Evan Ingram in that second tier of tight ends. This is this next tier that you're looking at right at the borderline of tight end one in the top 12. Tucker Kraft at 10, Jonas Smith at 11, Dalton Kincaid at 12, Dallas Goedert at 13, Jake Ferguson at 14. Then back-to-back, you have the 2 rookies, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. So this is just becoming a sea of what are we going to get from these guys, right? That's a bunch of question marks. I mean, Jonas Smith being still in the top 12 by being just traded and going to another team that had like a middling tight end. I mean, that's just makes it even more confusing here. So I don't know what to do with these guys. I mean, it's tough. Like, I think I might look at Goddard or Ferguson because they could do something, right? You've seen their evidence at some point, and then you've seen what Warren and Loveland have as upside. So it's also not in a great spot to say, oh, I'm going to target Dalton Kincaid and get a good value, where there's some more intriguing sleepers right behind him, or some guys who've done it before at that kind of production level in the back end tight end one before. So again, I don't see the reason to Kincaid if he doesn't have the upside, doesn't have the ceiling, doesn't have the floor.
Yeah, like I would rather, if I'm going to wait that long on a tight end, I'm going to go with Tyler Warren for the upside. We like him coming out of school, rookie, that he has the opportunity to be the top target on his team. I'm going to go with the upside when Kincaid he has not shown us that whatsoever. That will be it for today's episode. We will be back tomorrow discussing the New York Jets and their fantasy outlook for next year. We only have 2 teams left to get through. We've gone through 30 teams and all their top storylines entering 2025. 2 more to go with the Jets and Patriots. So stick with us and we will help you win your fantasy football leagues. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.